who has your experience as an architect and an engineer could pull off this incredible feat. So I'd like to start getting into it with you with basically how you approached balancing this very emotional storytelling through the lens of F1, Formula One, and also how you balanced the technical logistics of making this film.
Well, this whole thing started with me reaching out to the guy next to me, Lewis Hamilton, and getting him to, be our partner on this as a 7-time world champion and also a film lover. That was the secret ingredient of this film, and we could not have made it without his help every step along the way. And not only the technical aspects, because Lewis was involved in checking every technical aspect of this. We would go through the script line by line after race weekend on Zoom calls, getting every turn, every gear correct. But what was really special was when he shared with us kind of the more spiritual side of what he does. And that scene on the balcony where Brad tells Carrie and her character why he drives, a lot of that came out of this really kind of personal discussion we had with Lewis one day where he told us about that. And when he said to me the car disappears, I instantly knew how to shoot that scene. And that is an amazing gift you can only get from someone who lives and breathes it every day. So I'm so glad he's here finally on one of these Q&As with us, and so honored, I know we all are, to have him as our partner.
So to that point, Lewis, can you tell us, it must have been sort of a daunting prospect, because many F1 films have been made before, but nothing as authentic as this film. How did you ensure from your life experience the accuracy of what the filmmakers were producing?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. I hope that you enjoyed the movie. This has been like the most unbelievable experience. Just growing up in a normal home, watching film, dreaming of one day like somehow having some sort of part in a movie. And getting this opportunity to work with this incredible cast and team has just been the biggest dream. And I didn't know how much involvement I was gonna get when we first started talking, but it was full hands on deck. Like as soon as I was finishing up, when I was away from the track, we were working on the script and everything in between, just trying to figure out how we can, because if you look at a lot of the movies before from racing, they just didn't quite keep you on the edge of the seat. If you look at right back in the day from the Queen days, where they're like the guys like laying on the front of the car filming, to now what you're seeing with the incredible evolution of technology with Apple and capturing those new cameras that they designed to capture different angles. Like the footage we have from the cars are better than what you see when you watch Formula One. And I'm sure at some point Formula One's pretty sure they're looking to see how we can get those cameras on our car. But they're pretty heavy, aren't they? All the gear.
They're getting smaller all the time. So, yeah.
But the FIA are making the cars heavier, so I'm sure they'll fit it in somewhere. But for me, it was just, when we first spoke, it was really just about authenticity, making sure that it's as authentic as it can be. And I felt a lot of responsibility, particularly because all the other racing drivers and people within the paddock would really, when we sat in Monaco to watch the movie, I was shaking, because I was like, okay, this is the first time everyone's seeing this. And the response from all the drivers and everyone in the sport was amazing. And throughout the world as well, just seeing how people have loved watching it, it's been a privilege.
It's been amazing to watch the excitement grow over the summer for F1 too, because of this movie. Jerry, we talked about Steve McQueen, Le Mans, but I don't think maybe since Tom Cruise and your film Days of Thunder, have we had a movie star like Brad Pitt who's really racing cars and making a movie like this. So how did this experience of making this movie differ for you than making Days of Thunder?
Well, the sport is much different. There are only 10 teams, 2 drivers to each team. And it's the only sport where your teammate is your competitor. And the machines are unbelievable. You see our pit crew, that's a small part of what Formula One is. There are 1,000 people back in England giving them, each team, what the tire temperature, all kinds of crazy things that they go through during a race. So it's just, and also what we set out to do is to make it for real. We have to thank Eddie Q and Jamie and Zach at Apple for allowing us to make this real. When I say real, Brad Pitt and Damson drove practice for 4 months with Lewis overseeing part of it to make sure that they could drive these cars. They started in like an F4 and then finally moved up to what we had as an F1 car with an F2 engine. And they were going 180 miles an hour. Wow. And the scariest thing for me as a producer, you don't want anybody to get hurt. And the scariest track for us was Vegas, because Vegas, there is no runoff. It's a street track. So if these guys miss a turn, they go right into the wall. But fortunately, they practiced so much and worked so hard that they made every turn. And it was just phenomenal, the amount of work and energy that they put into this. When you watch this movie and you see Brad and Damson in the car, they're actually driving these cars. This is not something that... It's not special effects. It's the real deal. And they put their life on the line to make this movie as authentic as possible.
It's incredible. I'm going to come to you next, Damson, because I do want to talk to the driving, but maybe we'll get into the training a little bit later for the driving. I'm interested, you know, you've been in a lot of brilliant worlds and interesting worlds performing before, but it's got to be a special thing to come on to a Jerry Bruckheimer, Joe Kosinski film and play the Swan to Brad Pitt's character, Sonny Hayes. So how do you psychologically get ready to play that role?
Wow, it's a great question. You know, the whole experience was really daunting. You know, my audition was a driving test. At Bedford Palmers in England, and I drove an F3000, a JPLM 2-seater that day, and it was my maturity that really got me the part. So the guys told me it's getting dark in here.
You're getting better looking.
Whoa, my voice ain't that soothing. It was. That's why it's getting dark.
Sorry. Don't believe a word he says. Sorry all, I just got off the plane. Happy to be here though. And I miss you all.
We're happy you're here. We're just getting into Damson's audition.
So basically, this is Brad Pitt. And just from him walking in, you can see how accommodating he is and how he just really wants you to win and takes away all nerves. So I was always confident in his presence.
Okay, but really, what did he say before I got here?
So I want to get into the training for both of you, because you did spend 3 months driving these cars, and I've heard Gary Powell, the stunt coordinator or director, say that your times, Brad, are just seconds away from record-breaking times.
Sir Lewis Hamilton might have something to say about that. I don't know about that, but we did have the time of our lives. In fact, Lewis was brave enough to first get in the car with me at my first time I got on any kind of track. But it was an amazing experience that we had, you know, the real pit crews, we had the real deal, we had the real cars, the real machines. And we drove for 2 years, really. So I wish we could do it all over again, because we are so much better.
So I want to talk a little bit about how your character, the film's been out a while, and audiences are really connecting to Sonny Hayes. And you've played so many iconic characters before, from Moneyball to Thelma and Louise to Cliff Booth, Oscar-winning role. Yeah, so I've got loads more, but I'll stop on your Oscar-winning role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So the question is, what is it about Sonny Hayes, you playing Sonny Hayes, that you think is really connecting for audiences?
Well, I think at first I think it's the world of the sport, but within that, I think the Sonny Hayes character is a redemption story. I mean, we've all, stumbled in our lives. We've all had times where we've had to pick ourselves up and when it seemed impossible and the odds seemed impossible and get back in the fight. And that's when we grow. That's when we see the most growth. That's when probably we see the most rewards as individuals. So that would be my guess. That's what appealed to me about it. As far as the Sonny Hayes goes. But we got to go back to the world and this incredible, I can't say enough. I take so for granted what Joe did with these cars and building these sequences that we got to put our story into is just something, it's staggering. I look back now and the 2 years, 3 years you spent doing that is just something I've just never seen before. And I think it was this amazing confluence of events, of story of F1 really being introduced in another way to the U.S. What Joe was able to do with the technology, it just all came together. Lewis coming in, of course Jerry, who just can't make a bad movie, and then the rest of us. I think it was just something extraordinary that all came together at once.
Jerry touched a little bit before on the balcony scene, and I really think that is key. It's the essence of this character and in some ways of the story when we hear the things that you tell Kate. So can you tell us how you approached that scene?
Well, we got the bulk of that scene from Lewis, actually. This was before we even started filming, and we were still, we developed our script, fair to say, till the very end. Whatever hadn't been shot was still being worked on as we went, and honing that scene. But it really stemmed from, we had a 12-hour session with, Lewis gave up 12 hours of his day to spend with us, and we just kept querying him about questions, and does this float? Does this pass the smell test? No, that doesn't work, but it could be this. And he really, it was what Lewis had described for us of these moments of absolute pure bliss that I don't even think we portrayed as well as Lewis described it on that day, but it really stemmed from that, and this idea of winning is one thing, but the purity of the sport, the feeling, that thing that fulfills you, that you don't question, you don't doubt, you just are. And to find those moments where, I guess just that kind of purity, where you are the ultimate of presence. And this certainly, Damson and I talked about it, we felt in the car. And that's to me what in all our discussions, what we gathered from what Lewis was describing to us that day. So it's really, we have him to thank.
I love it because I think it's so fascinating that, Lewis talks about this in terms of striving for the zen of race driving. But it seems to me that it's what actors and all artists are striving for, to be in that flow, to have that moment of ultimate presence that we see in the last scene of the film.
I'm going to stop talking because these people are much more interesting.
Yeah,
But I would just say that that's the human, that's the goal. That's human existence. That's finding ways to be present with everything that we're having to deal with or is coming at us in a day. I think that's the game of being human.
Sarah.
I knew that was a beeline.
I'm really interested. It just adds so much depth to Damson's story, to Joshua's story, to have the presence of his mother, to see and feel the presence of that relationship. Can you tell us about how you created your character and the backstory from the script?
I feel like a lot of it is because the space was afforded to me. Like, she's a part of the story, and I always knew that. But it was the openness that Joe had and Jerry had in giving me the space to create this character. And one of the things I always remember is Joe said, you should meet Lewis and come in and have a conversation about the character. And there was a lot of freedom within that. We're going to make her, she's from the Caribbean, and one of the things also that you said to me, that you had a writer overlooking the character. I was like, there's only 2 scenes in this film with this character. When we first approached it, I was like, you got a writer specifically overlooking this character. That's when you understand the levels of understanding how you create the whole story. And when I spoke to Lewis, and he discussed about how he was growing up in the sport and from go-karting onwards, and talked about his dad and his mum and support, I really had an understanding of where to place Bernadette. And also I thought, specifically, she was meant to be Jamaican, and then after speaking to Lewis, I said she can't be Jamaican, she has to be from a smaller island, like Barbados, like. So just so many elements, and from the read-through, where Brad was like, really happy you're on this film, and just the openness and the heart. I didn't really understand until I watched the movie how much heart is in the movie. And going back to that idea about actors, I always think about some of the lines that Sonny has when he talks about freedom. And I can imagine what that's like in the car, that moment, just when it's the silence that you talked about in the film. Sonny talks about that silence. I think as artists, as creatives, and in life as humans, we're always looking for that silence, that moment when you feel like you're flying. And yeah.
And I love, like the apology scene. It's so obvious just because you're there, the pressure that she's exerted upon you. So can you tell us a little bit, Damson, about that scene?
I've had to apologize to my real mother plenty of times. No, the whole experience with Sarah was just so effortless. Her energy and aura, as the kids say today, just instantly puts you there. And that is actually one of my favorite scenes, because it's a turning point for Joshua, where he's really taking in the guidance that Sonny's been giving him the entire movie, and he's stepping up, he's being a man, he's being a leader for Apex GP. So yeah, that was a freedom moment.
Yeah.
Joe, you love that scene too, don't you?
I do. I mean, it's just, the real answer to all these questions is, the most important thing you do as a director is hire a great cast. And they take whatever material you have, and they always find a way to elevate it. And the truth is, each one of them took this part that was on the page, and obviously we had these hopes and dreams of what it could be, but they elevated it, beyond my expectations every day. And so, hire a great cast and create space for them to create and do their thing, and hopefully you get those little magic moments. But yeah, I mean, just the chemistry you see on screen was there off screen as well. I think we just had a great group of people, and we all wanted to make Lewis proud. I think we all felt an enormous amount of pressure to represent this sport, because we knew he was really putting his reputation on the line, and the sport was counting on us to make a great movie. We all worked hard every day, and we never quit until we felt like, we had gotten it.
But it's the energy that this team put into making this movie. And it's not just the driving that they did, it's the energy that they put into the script, because that creates the emotion, that's what moves you. And just the hours and days and months that Brad and Lewis and Joe spent time working with our writers to make this as good as it can be. And then after that, the energy that they put into making the movie and then editing the movie, because Brad was involved and Lewis was involved. They were in the editing room. You know what? He's got a day job, and Brad's got a lot of other movies to make. But they took the time to spend it on this project to make it as good as it possibly could be.
Actors love directors who take time. I want to get into the rehearsal process a little bit, because I know that rehearsing the cast and the crew for this movie was absolutely extraordinary. So can you explain, for those of us who might not know, some of the logistical issues with embedding yourself into F1 to accomplish this?
Right, well, normally, when you're shooting a film, you have hours or days to shoot a scene. Because we wanted to shoot this film live at the Grand Prix, while the events are going on, often we'd only get a few minutes. So, there were times where I would, tell Brad Damson, we'll be lucky to get 3 takes at this, especially that opening scene at Silverstone. We actually shot 3 scenes back to back in about 15 minutes. But we had
No pressure.
Yeah, we had to rehearse. We spent 2 weeks rehearsing, blocking. We did it with a stopwatch to show the FIA that we could actually pull off what we were going to do. And then, you add 100,000 or 150,000 spectators into it, and the chaos of the start of an F1 race, and we're trying to shoot a movie, and they know they've got 2 takes, to get it, and whatever they do is going to end up in the movie. That's just the way it is, and that's the price you pay making a movie like this. So what I found was, the actors, you guys always rose to the occasion. I can't think of one time where someone flubbed a line or screwed up. We definitely had a couple people dive bomb our scenes while we were shooting, asking Brad for his autograph. No, it's in that pressure. I just found the cast and the crew rose to it and brought an energy to the film that you just wouldn't get if you had staged it on your own. So it was kind of the now looking back, I'm like, God, that was pretty reckless. And for Apple to, put their faith in us to actually shoot a movie this way is pretty amazing. And, luckily we pulled it off.
And for the FIA, I mean, I couldn't believe it when I heard you had an 11th car. So just to explain, you had a car on the grid during real Grand Prix races following the real race.
Well, they let us do the formation lap, but then we had to pull off when the race actually started. Maybe in the sequel they'll let Brad Damson actually race. That would be amazing, but there's definitely some, we did some magic tricks to give the illusion that they're in the race, but they were there shooting their scenes between practice and qualifying sessions in front of that large crowd. And I know these guys, that was the most nervous I've ever seen either of them, was knowing that, if they were going to spin out, 100,000 people would watch them do it. So,
I just pretend it was Brad.
To that point, one of the things that I thought was exceptional is the first time that you hit the rail, if that's the wall, if that's the right term, and the car spins and you come towards camera and we can see it's you driving. That shot blew my mind, because we've never seen that in a movie before. I mean,
That's Joe Kaczynski.
yeah, we used every trick that, this is my 6th film, every trick I've learned, we used to pull that off, but ultimately it starts with, these guys being in the car for real, so that when you do shots like that, you're totally invested and think, it's really happening. But yeah, we were not going to kill either of these guys. That was my directive every morning, keep them alive.
That was actually a saying on set: we cannot kill Brad Pitt.
I won't ask about insurance. But speaking to Lewis's point, I think, Joshua's crash is based on the crash in Bahrain in 2020. It just looks absolutely incredible, that whole scene. And talking about the silences, when the music, I think I'm going to cry thinking about it, when the music came down during that crash, we all know what silence means on a racetrack. It was, can you talk a little bit about creating that scene?
Can I just correct you? It wasn't actually it was the Bahrain scene, the car in flames. We utilized that.
Yes.
But there was actually a crash in Formula 3, in the same corner in practice, where a kid hit the curb and actually flew and landed up on the tires. So we took that kind of shot as the inspiration for that one. But of course, the ball of flames is what we saw in Bahrain.
I spoke to a driver before shooting that scene who had been in a situation like that, and really took in how, it does become fight or flight, and you instantly think of what you need to fight for in order to get out of the car during those precious moments, and your family and everyone you're fighting for. And he explained to me of that moment of potentially giving up, and as soon as he told me that was, I knew how to play it. And I was in the fire for real, by the way.
It's kind of crazy. We have to do a test at the beginning of the year. When we get to the first race, we have to do a jump out of the car test, and you have to get out of the cockpit. With, they time you. You have to be within 7 seconds. taking the steering wheel off, getting out, putting the steering wheel back on. But of course, since they introduced the halo, that gets harder because it's harder to get out of the cockpit with the
Sorry,
halo.
what's the halo?
The halo is the big, ugly thing that sits kind of around the top of us. It's called a halo.
And that's a safety thing in
It's a
race
safety
cars.
thing, yeah, and it came in, I don't know, 2016, 17 maybe, and it was something that all the drivers were against because it looked so ugly. So before it kind of looks a little bit like, you know, those kind of sliders, flip-flops, the bit that goes between your toe. And none of us liked it, but the improvement in safety was like 17% or something like that, so we couldn't deny it. And it's been great, and we now get used to it. But when that crash in Bahrain, that was one of the things that made it really difficult for him to get out, because it's between the halo and the barrier. So he was in those flames for a lot longer than any other drivers of recent times.
It's excruciating, and kudos to Kerry and the ensemble, because it's their reactions that are terrifying us. Your physicality, you know, when you come out of the fire, like we know before we see your mama bandaging your hand, that, you know, so can you talk a little bit about the physicality of that?
Well, it was a kind of limpness that we kind of played. A lot of it, I remember I was putting all my weight on you.
He's fucking heavy.
Brad was pissed. But it was so real. Yeah, it was an amazing, it was a great scene. But no, yeah, that state of mind was terrifying, you know, and the flames were really going, and the silence that was on screen, it was there on that day too. Everyone was safe, but everyone understood how important this moment was, not only for the film, but for the respect of the sport, because so many people have been in that situation. Yeah.
I want to
I
talk
just add
before.
also, just sorry to interrupt you, it's the psychological element of like then getting back in, which Damson had to do from a crash like that. It's not easy to get back in the car and give it everything and have the trust and kind of let it go. You know?
But I think that's a theme that's been so brilliantly weaved in, because when we get to the last race, you are literally, we understand because of the flashbacks to the earlier race, that Sonny Hayes is literally risking his life for this race. I want to talk to you, Joe, about how you created so much drama that people are literally shouting "go, go, go" at a screen during that last scene.
Well, that was something we talked about from the very beginning. You know, Jerry has made race movies before, and, you know, he knew the watch out was, you know, they're just predictable. You know the hero's going to win at the end of the day. So from the beginning, we were like, how do we try to avert that problem? And, you know, I have to thank our writer, Aaron Kruger, from the very start, who said, you got to want them both to win. Okay? You got to really want Joshua to win, and you got to really want Sonny to win, but you know they both can't win. So how do we get to that? And, you know, we spent a lot of time working on, we actually shot an ending where Joshua won as well, really just to fake out the crowd, because we didn't want everyone knowing the end of our movie. So we did have to shoot both endings, but you know, we spent a lot of time going back and forth. The red flag sequence was something that actually we came up with during the SAG strike. So that was one benefit of that strike. Thank you guys. And I think that helped ratchet up the tension to really make it come down to those final 3 laps. But we knew it had to come down to teamwork, because that's what the whole film is based on, them helping, you know, both were willing to sacrifice their own race to help their teammate and to help the team, and that's really the moral of this story, you know, in a sport where, you know, I mean, Lewis can speak to this better than anyone, but often your teammate becomes your biggest rival. This story ends with these 2 guys willing to sacrifice their own race to help the other one. And I think, you know, somehow, thank God, we got to a point where it does really feel earned. Sonny, you know, sacrifices for Joshua to win. Then Joshua does the math in his head and realizes that with him and Lewis going down that main straight wheel to wheel, you know, if he doesn't come out of that, Sonny's right behind him to pick up the pieces, which is what happens. Yeah, we talked about it from the beginning, and yeah, there's nothing more gratifying than being in an audience for that last 3 laps and just watching them react. Yeah.
brilliant. And yes, kudos to Aaron Kruger, because all of those obstacles along the way seem so believable and reasonable. You're never out of the movie. Like, it's just, and to build this villain with Tobias Menzies as well, it just, the stakes keep rising without you even realizing it, because you are just along for the team's journey. I want to talk to you about the cameras, because the speed is something Jerry talked about in the beginning. We've never seen this kind of speed, and as Lewis said, I think this is something F1 wants to integrate so that we can watch it on television. So can you tell us about the camera innovation? I know that Apple developed something special for you.
Yeah, so the cameras to shoot this film did not exist when we started. We had to invent them ourselves. So we started with the system that we developed for Top Gun Maverick, and we worked very closely with Sony. My DP, Claudio Miranda, and his whole camera department, who are all like geniuses, 3D printing parts overnight in our hotel rooms to make this all work. We developed a new camera system about a third of the size. That was a prototype. Sony built 20 prototypes for us, and those were the tiny cameras mounted onto these cars. But still, these were in their line of sight, so they're having to drive with 4 little cameras, in their field of view, which makes it even more difficult. We also developed a panning head with Panavision that allowed us to move the camera, which is something we were never able to do on Top Gun. So that was something I really wanted to do on this film and really help connect the action to them. So you see it's really them driving. It's not like there's a stunt driver in front of them or they're being towed by another vehicle, which is typically how you would make a movie like this. And then Apple, they also developed a bespoke camera based on the iPhone that fit in the pod behind the heads of the real Formula One drivers during the races. So we had 2 to 4 Apple cameras on board all the races, and even Lewis was carrying that camera in Abu Dhabi. And that was getting 4K footage from the real races, and we have about 31 shots from that camera in the movie as well. So it all had to be created to make this movie, and it was all in an effort to capture what Lewis said at the beginning, which was, really try to give the audience the experience of driving one of these cars.
And then we had the cameras from the actual race. We used their cameras. So you can just imagine what our editor, Steve Marioni, had. He had 5,000 feet of film,
5,000
hours of film to go through to make this movie. And then our sound crew, Skywalker and Al Nelson, they had to go to all these tracks because Lewis would know that the sound would be different in every track and every corner. So they had to record the sound all over the world to make this movie. That's the kind of effort that Joe demanded and our team here demanded to make this movie as accurate as possible.
I'm glad mammoth effort from Stephen Marioni, and also the sound design, Gareth John, just absolutely incredible. I understand you had to avoid broadcast feeds and all kinds of problems and solutions. So kudos to all of you. Thank you so much for being here and giving us more detail about this project, and see you down the road.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.